Hi all, I've been meaning to go over a very exciting game which occurred in the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour finals. So this was in round 2. Magnus Carlsen was playing against Hikaru Nakamura. So let's have a look at this mega clash. D4 from Magnus, we see knight f6, c4, e6, and now Magnus accepts the possibility of the Nimzo Indian defense by playing knight c3. A lot of grandmasters shy away from this with knight f3 nowadays. That seems to be the more common choice, in fact. So knight c3 allowing the Nimzovichian pin. And now Magnus plays the Rubinstein variation, e3. This has a solid reputation, named after Akiba Rubinstein. Black castled here, and now we have bishop d3, c5, and now knight ge2, d5, and now a3. Nakamura takes on c3, and white strengthens the centre actually with b takes c3. You might think this is an interesting decision. Why not knight takes? On knight takes, black can actually play c takes and d takes to saddle white with an isolated queen's pawn. And this could be very nice actually for black. This seems actually just an even position. So this seems actually more solid in a way to have the double pawns. You might not think so, but it's got its upsides here. We see d takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen c7. So this means actually now c takes d4 is on the cards, hitting the bishop. The bishop is retreated. If white really didn't want to retreat the bishop, say castling c takes and play queen takes, this is just a fragmented pawn chain. And after knight c6, the only player that's better is black structurally. It's a small edge there. So bishop a2, it does mean there's a kind of weakness created that this diagonal potentially for this bishop has been neglected for a moment. We do see Nakamura pouncing on that with b6. White castles bishop a6. So choosing this diagonal is very, very interesting instead of this diagonal. We see bishop b2, knight c6, rook c1, rook a c8, and now actually the ambitious move c4, which does imply actually d5 might be on the cards to open up this bishop and to fracture black's structure with bishop takes f6. Here Nakamura took on d4 just to illustrate a few alternatives. If rook fe8, d5 a forcing move. After e takes, bishop takes f6. And here, c takes, there's an interesting dynamic possibility for white for sacrificing the exchange here with knight g3, so offering the f1 rook. Because there's significant compensation after knight f5 hitting the queen, there is actually very interesting dynamic compensation here for white. So white might actually be better there, at least in a practical sense for sure, but even theoretically. This is nice for white. So anyway, so after c4, c takes d4 is played, e takes, and now queen e7, so safeguarding against that kind of possibility. Or is it? Magnus actually plays d5 anyway, after e takes, so a pawn sacrifice, rook e1, threatening to unveil an attack against the queen. And if, say, knight f4, then it's pretty devastating if bishop takes and knight takes. So this is really kind of, well, very dangerous stuff, this discovered attack against the queen. We see bishop takes c4 though, now. Does black have time for this? If d takes c4, actually there might be stronger in knight g3 here. And in fact, black might be okay, technically. There's not actually such a big concern here for the dynamic pressure. So anyway, bishop takes c4 is played here, and we do see knight g3, queen d8, so holding on to f6. That's a solid way. Make sure that bishop takes f6 is not damaging the structure. Bishop b1, so Magnus has actually played a double pawn sack here. It's fascinating, and this is why the game has kind of caught my interest. I feel this is like Alpha-Zero style double pawn sack. What is going on here? These bishops do seem rather beautiful attacking on the king side, and there is like knight h5, knight f5, the possibility of the queen coming in. So very, very interesting position. We see b5 being played. If g6, just to get a flavour of some possibilities, knight at f5 might be plausible. Black shouldn't really take this, it seems, maybe, because a bishop takes f5, and white could be building up significant pressure with bishop d7. There's some really interesting tactics behind the scenes here for the king safety issues. So say knight takes, there's check, and then mating. The bishop and queen are mating there. So this actually is a very, very interesting line indeed behind the scenes. If rook takes d7, bishop takes f6, and it's just hopeless. So yeah, but the thing is, black doesn't have to actually take on f5. If we have this situation, after knight f5, black could just ignore it with rook e8 and actually be okay. For example, like this, it should be about even. But it's interesting nonetheless, these dynamic possibilities now. So we see b5 anyway here. Now knight f5 and d4, just trying to shut down this bishop. So is this the end of the attack? There was actually a potential threat here. For example, just to put this on the board, a5. Can you see what white could play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, white to play here. Okay, knight takes g7. They say pin and win. There's a nasty pin on f6 here. Queen g4 check, queen h4, hitting f6 again. If d4 here, this is very, very interesting indeed, because the knight's kind of virtually pinned anyway, because the bishop is looking at h7 as well, so can't move. And white has a big, big frets here indeed. If knight g8, queen takes h7, and what does actually black do here? If rook e8, rook takes, then queen takes. This is devastating. This position is at least a big advantage anyway for white. There's a lot of attacking potential there going on. No respite for the king. So d4 at least shuts down the dark square bishop. And we see now queen d2, which seems to promise ideas like queen g5 being dangerous. We see bishop e6. Just to put some stuff on the board here, so trying to challenge that knight immediately. If a5, queen g5, it turns out actually this position might not be so clear. For example, this kind of attack is not entirely clear. Black might have a small edge there in that sample. So, okay, but bishop e6 was played. If, just to follow that through again though, queen g5, g6, if this happened, white could actually, instead of queen h6, go in for a4, just play on the queen side here, and it should be okay. For example, rook b8, then h4, and it should lead to an even position actually, so with perpetual check at least. But back to the game, bishop e6 challenging the knight on f5, and we have now supporting the knight with rook c5, a6. Bishop takes was also possible, it seems, if bishop takes. Queen d6 offering exchange. Well, not really, but hitting the rook. So if that rook's supported, it's about equal. So a6 is played, and we have actually now, guess what Magnus plays in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, white to play here. Okay, Magnus plays this knight sack anyway, even with the bishop currently closed off on that diagonal because of this pawn. So we have king takes, queen g5 check, king h8, and now the queen parking on h4. So the knight's virtually pinned because, again, that issue with h7 here, the knight's protecting h7. And Nakamura here faltered. He played rook g8. There is a move here which apparently might be, it should be okay for black. Rook e8. And white's best might be g3, for example, this line, where it ends up being about even after rook takes d5. This is crazy, crazy, crazy stuff, trying to distract the knight from h7. So like there's a standard like mating pattern essentially here, or at least perpetual check, at least perpetual check. But black can actually maybe do better with queen e1 check, and then taking here. This is just crazy line, and it ends up about even. But anyway, so rook e8, g3 turns out, this will only be about even with the best moves. If rook takes c6 here to try and puncture through the diagonal, black has bishop f5. And because of the back row issue, this is really interesting. Black's actually doing well here. Rook takes, queen takes. Here, there's always bishop g6 to defend, and there's a threat here of queen e1 checkmate. So black's actually winning this. If queen g5, bishop g6, black's actually winning here because of this threat of checkmating. Yep. So very, very interesting that rook e8 would have been the key move here, but rook g8 was played. Game on now. White plays rook takes c6. So really maximizing this pin on the knight now. It's an absolute pin to the king as well as a virtual pin because it has to defend h7. So a fascinating position. We see king g7. If bishop f5, the king tries to help himself. If bishop f5, just taking, it's hopeless, and taking, it's no respite here. So king g7, and we see queen takes h7 check, queen h6 check, and bishop takes f6. So what's happened here? Well, white is a pawn up, but the exchange down, but the bishop pair is legendary here. It's an open center position if you look at the center, and the bishops are running rampant. We see queen a5. Okay, that hits the rook. The queen comes back to protect, and we see queen b6 challenging the queen. And in fact, Magnus plays technically a mistake here, kind of resetting his advantage to not much at all. Rook d1. It does mean rook d8 checkmate if queen takes e3 here. Kind of Morphy style checkmate. So rook d1 was played. Before we go into that, if the way apparently is bishop e4, the way forward, the best way forward, bishop e4. So here, if rook d6, then queen f3, and it's game on. White has a lot of significant pressure and can increase the advantage, it seems, soon, with rook b1, for example, crashing through the back row. The rooks are pretty awkward here, and black's king safety is troublesome. This would be winning for white. If we look at these variations again, this is fascinating stuff, I thought, after bishop e4. A basic point to note, if queen takes e3, we have bishop takes c6 check, and then rook takes e3 winning. If rook c8, that neglects the queen. We just take the queen. So after bishop e4, rook d6, queen f3. If instead of king f8, if a5 here, white can make improvements with h4. And if black ever dares push this pawn, as an example, there's bishop c2. And you can see that the bishops are really running rampant in the position. If b3, that can just be taken as that bishop's pinned. And say king f8, and in fact queen a8 check shows how dangerous it is for the black king in this position. This bishop is covering a lot of key escape squares as well as d8. So that's disastrous. So yeah, it's as if black's collapsing in those positions after this move, bishop e4. This is the most incisive move. But rook d1 was played, and okay, if queen takes, I'll just put this on the board, then there's the opera mate, rook d8 checkmate. But black doesn't have to do that, and didn't do that. Black played rook d6, and we have bishop d4, queen c6, threatening checkmate here. And this might be there might be a better alternative here. b4 is actually possible because the bishop's pinned to the rook. That'll be back row mate of taking eventually. So if f4, b takes a3, this position is actually technically equal, believe it or not. So the queenside pawns are potentially dangerous in this line. But so Nakamura sort of made another slip up. There was queen c6. So b4 was actually a kind of runaway pawn in this line. So queen c6, and again white has the advantage. Bishop e4, and the bishop pair is really enjoying this open centre here. Queen c4, h3, finally sorting out the back row issues, making some king d7. We see rook d2, and there's all sorts of nasty ideas now. We see rook e8, king h2, bishop d5, bishop f5 check, bishop e6, because if king d8, queen g5 check, and rook c2 wins the queen, pins the queen. So bishop e6, and we see bishop d3, queen a4. If queen takes d4 here, then there's bishop takes b5 check, exposing an attack on the queen. So queen a4, and we see bishop e5, and not only this hits the rook, but it also means the queen has access to a killer square, a7. And in fact, rook d5 was played, allowing queen a7 check. Game over. Black's getting checkmated. Black had to resign. If king d8, then the queen and bishop combine on c7. Or king c8, queen c7. Or king c6, queen c7. So anywhere queen c7 basically, after queen a7. I thought this was a fascinating game. I've been meaning to cover it for a few days actually. Very, very exciting stuff. So dynamic double pawn sacrifice, I thought Alpha-Zero style. I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. By the way, I have a brand new course on Udemy. If you check out kingscrusher.tv/opening-tango, there's actually, I think for the next day after this video, there's if you put in the coupon code YouTube, there's maximum discount. Otherwise, there is a discount to the end of the month anyway, if you miss that, which is pretty good. So, yeah, I hope you check that out. Put in a few weeks of intense research into that course, and I think I've really strengthened my openings with black. If you want to check me out on Discord, there's a Discord chat, kingscrusher.tv/Discord. Come and invite me for a game at bit.ly/chessworld or kingscrusher.tv. So if you register there, I'll be able to invite you for a game soon after at chessworld. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes with the notification bell. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much.